Welcome back to Math 103. This is video number 21 on fair division. We are now carrying out an example of the lone chooser method, where we are told that Lauren is the chooser and Kelly is the first divider. That means that at the first stage, Lauren leaves the room, so to speak. Kelly and Jason, the other player, carry out the divider-chooser method between the two of them, where Kelly is the divider. Now, that means that Kelly has to divide the year into two equally valuable pieces. Now, I caution you, this is where students make mistakes. So they are so used to dividing at this stage into three equally valuable pieces, because that's what happens in the lone divider method. But in the lone chooser method, it's a different approach. Remember the narrative that Jason and Kelly carry out the division just between the two of them, and then Lauren shows up at the end. So Kelly has to make her division at the value midpoint of the year, from her point of view. And that is in mid-May. Right, so we have this rule that January 1st is a turnover point. So Kelly is going to divide the year from January to mid-May and from mid-May to the end of December. Wait, where did mid-May come from? Because Kelly values the whole year at 9 Kelly points, so the value midpoint of the year, from her point of view, is 4.5 Kelly points into the year. And that's exactly at the midpoint of May. Think of that as May 15th, if you wish. Now, what about these 3 months at the end of the year that Kelly considers worthless? Well, remember, this is the divider-chooser method that they are applying at this first stage. So Kelly is just dividing the whole year into two equally valuable pieces, and if we have this rule that January 1st has to be one of the cutoff points, then these 3 months really have to be tacked on with the rest of mid-May through the end of September. So this has to form one whole share, and very well, this is worth half the year from Kelly's point of view. So it is one share, even though part of it is utterly worthless to her. As usual, we will call these S1 and S2. Great, so Kelly and Jason are in the middle of applying the divider-chooser method. Kelly has divided the year into two equally valuable pieces from her point of view, and now Jason has to choose which one he prefers. Well, given the choice between 4.5 Jason points of value and 7.5 Jason points of value, he will certainly pick the 7.5 Jason points of value. So Jason will choose S2 at this stage. So Jason chooses mid-May through end of December, and that leaves Kelly with January 1st through mid-May. Now we reach the subdivision stage. Kelly has to take her portion of the year, S1, that's January through mid-May, and subdivide it into three equally valuable pieces from her point of view. And meanwhile, Jason has to take his share, S2, and subdivide it into three equally valuable pieces from his point of view. So Kelly's share is worth 4.5 Kelly points to her. That figure, that's exactly half the total value of the year to her. So if this is worth 4.5 Kelly points, then 4.5 divided by 3 equals 1.5. Each subshare must be worth 1.5 Kelly points. So she's going to divide at mid-February and the end of March. So the beginning of January was already a division point, and so was mid-May. As a result, each of her subshares, is worth 1.5 Kelly points. So January through mid-February, that's 1.5. Okay, that's a subshare that we're going to call K1. Then mid-February through the end of March, that's another 1.5 Kelly points. We'll call that subshare K2. And finally, beginning of April through mid-May, that's another 1.5 Kelly points. We'll call that subshare K3. So once again, the logic was that her share is worth 4.5 Kelly points before she subdivides. She has to subdivide into three equal parts because that's how the method works. So 4.5 divided by 3 equals 1.5. each subshare must be worth 1.5 Kelly points. So she starts at the beginning of January and starts counting off 1.5 Kelly points into the year. That determines the cut at mid-February. She counts another 1.5 Kelly points from mid-February. That takes her to the end of March. She counts another 1.5 Kelly points. That takes her from early April, from beginning of April to mid-May. If we want to be fantastically thorough about it, we can write out the results like so, naming the subshares and giving verbal indications of what the months are. Next, we need to describe the subdivision which Jason makes, that is, describe the three subshares that we'll call J1, J2, and J3, which he creates from his share. So his share consists of mid-May through the end of December. That is worth a total of 7.5 Jason points. Now, 7.5 Jason points from 7.5 months, worth 1 point each, that 7.5 points works out to 2.5 points per subshare. Right, 7.5 divided by 3 gives you 2.5 Jason points per subshare. That means that he starts at mid-May and counts 2.5 points forward until he reaches the end of July. Then, from August, the beginning of August, he counts 2.5 points forward, and that brings him to mid-October. That's his second subshare. Finally, he counts 2.5 points forward from mid-October. That brings him to the end of December. That is his third subshare. And we'll label these J1, J2, J3 to be consistent with our earlier notation. As we did for Kelly, we can write out Jason's subshares in this way. J1 is mid-May through July, J2 August through mid-October, and J3 mid-October through December. We are now ready for Lauren, the chooser, to re-enter the scene. She will select one subshare from Kelly and one subshare from Jason. Kelly will be left with 2 of her subshares, whichever ones Lauren doesn't take, and Jason will be left with 2 of his subshares, whichever ones Lauren doesn't take. Before we get to Lauren's actions and her evaluations of subshares, there's a point that's worth reiterating because it's such a common student mistake. Here in this table, we have written out verbal descriptions of each of the subshares, which is important to be able to do, and we have a breakdown of how Jason and Kelly evaluate in their own point systems the subshares from their own original shares. Now here's the crucial point. How Jason values Kelly's subshares is completely irrelevant because he's never going to see them again. Right? He's going to end up with exactly 2 of his original subshares, and Lauren will get one of them, whichever one Lauren wishes. Kelly has no interest and no access to any of Jason's original subshares. Kelly's valuations only matter for her own original subshares. She will keep 2 of them, whichever 2 Lauren doesn't take for herself. Now Lauren, the chooser, returns. Before going on to the next video, answer the following questions. How much is each of Kelly's subshares worth to Lauren in Lauren points? And which one does she select? Which one of Kelly's subshares does Lauren select? And how much is each of Jason's subshares worth to Lauren in Lauren points? Which one of Jason's subshares does she select for herself?